I received a text from a pastor, and this is what the text said. Rick and Rita were having a home birth, but something went wrong, and the baby died. Well, I was busy, and I got that text, and my first thought was, I'm not an obstetrician. I sounds kind of messy. Probably shouldn't get involved. Then my second thought was, well, I wonder what happened, because the brain has this curiosity whenever there's a tragedy. We want to know, what happened, because if you can figure out what happened and then whose fault it was or who you can blame, you believe you could avoid that tragedy in the future. And then the third thought I had, which I believe was from the Lord, was they must be feeling overwhelming shame. And then I thought, well, yeah, but their parents are probably around them, helping out. But I felt like God was nudging me to get involved in something that was clearly not my specialty. So I texted back the pastor, and I got Rick's number. Now, I knew Rick and Rita only peripherally. I believe I knew some years ago they were engaged, wasn't invited to their wedding, didn't really know they got married, but obviously a few years had passed, and here they were having their first child. Well, I texted Rick and said, if there's anything I can do, be glad to help. And he sent me a text back, and he said, they've taken Rita and the baby to the hospital. If you could talk to my wife, that might help, because she's beating herself up. She was in labor for 48 hours and didn't sleep. And she believes that if she would have just pushed harder, she would have had a baby. Well, I'm driving to the hospital, and I'm trying to think of what I'm going to say. What would you say? A lot of us, now that we're in the age of texting, we actually don't say a lot. We'd rather not get involved with some of those messy situations. What are you going to say? See, I like to hide behind the doctor role, because then I can quote statistics and figures, and I can say, well, yes, a certain percentage does that, and sort of arm's length. But I knew that wasn't really going to work with Rita. I drove to the hospital, and I didn't know what I was going to say. I walked into her room. In fact, I stopped in the bathroom first just to see if I could stall a little bit. I might think of something to say, and I didn't, but I remember something that I learned early on. You can always say, I'm sorry. And it's always worth going to somebody in pain, holding their hand and saying, I'm sorry. And so with that, I just went in her room. The room looked like death. It was just something in there it was just Rita in the bed. Her husband, Rick, was next to her sitting in a chair, and she looked terrible. Young woman, but her face was pale and ashen, and she looked like death. I've been in the room with a number of people that have been close to death or that have died. It's been part of my career to walk people through those stages, and she looked like that. And so I sat on the bed, and I held her hand, and I said, "I'm sorry." She didn't look at me because I believe she thought that from me, from the medical establishment, was going to come a lot of scolding and vitriol. And I looked around and I wondered, why were they the only two people in the room? Where were their family? I knew they had local families. Well, it turns out that when somebody does something that people don't agree with, they're scared to be around them or involved with them, or they feel that they need to be shamed, they need to be punished. And so the mother-in-laws had their expression telling Rick and Rita how crazy they were and how responsible they were. And this woman not only was dealing with the tragedy, but she was dealing with all of this shame. Well, Rick started telling me a little bit of the story. And as I heard the details, I thought, there were some things I probably would have done differently. You know how that is. We all have our opinion. My wife will tell you I have an opinion on everything. I'm a neurosurgeon, and if you need to know something, even if I know nothing at all about it, I will have an opinion on that. But the interesting thing is that most everyone has that. She will admit that she has an opinion on pretty much everything as well. And we all do. So as this information is coming in, I'm sort of formulating my medical opinion, and I'm kind of biting my tongue not to say, you see, when we're uncomfortable, when we're awkward, what we want to do, men, is fix it. If we want to explain it, we want to say what should have been done, what could have been done, this is the way it was. Most of the time, unless somebody's asking you your advice, they probably just want you to listen. They probably just want you to empathize with what they're going through, if that's possible. And so I listened. And I said, after I'd heard a bit, I said again, "I'm sorry." And she said, it was a baby boy. And they let me hold him for just a few moments. And I said, you are parents. You're not failed parents. You are parents. That boy lives. You will see him again. His name was Samuel. We named him. I said, you will see Samuel again. He is with Jesus, and he's in no pain. And she said, I'm never going through this again. I'm never going to do this again. It's so common. This is what your brain does when it's in a lot of emotional pain. It's trying to help you. It's trying to figure out how you never have to feel this again. And so you start making vows, which are actually more like curses. And so I was able to say to her, you don't need to say that. I know that's how you feel right now. You never want to feel this pain again. But as hard as this is to believe, this season will pass. And I had her husband, Rick, come over and put his hand on her belly, and I put my hand over his, and I said, let's pray for her. And we prayed over her womb, and I prayed fruitfulness, and I prayed life for her body and her soul and her spirit. And then I said to her, I know that people are criticizing you for your decision, but nobody can tell you that that would not have happened in a hospital. You see, that what the mind does is as soon as something goes wrong with whatever we're doing, that we assume had we made the other decision, it would have been fine. But we actually don't know that. But that's what the mind is doing, to try to help you never feel this pain again. The pain actually can be very, very redemptive. It can be very important in our lives. And if all we live for is to never feel that pain again, our life becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. And then I began speaking words of life to her. I said to her and her husband, I know why you wanted to have a baby at home, because you wanted to give your baby a natural birth. You didn't want your baby born in a sterile hospital. You cared enough to want that child born at home. I see your heart, and God sees your heart. You see, when all that anger is raining down upon people, what they're saying is your heart is bad. But when we have the best of intentions and things go badly, we think our heart is bad. And I was able to call that out of them. I see your heart, and God sees your heart. And God is not angry with you. Other people may be, but God is not. He's actually grieving with you. He knows what it's like to lose a child. I have on my cell phone an alarm that goes off at 11:11. And all of those ones mean to me, there's me and the three members of the Trinity, and we're all together right now at 11:11. It just is something I do to remind me, whatever I'm doing, whatever I'm involved with, God is with me right here. I'm on the computer, I'm in the car, whatever I'm doing, God is with me. It's just because we get caught up in whatever we're doing and we get stressed out and we forget. And what I had playing on that alarm was Good, Good Father. And it started playing. And I pulled it out and I just let it play. And I stood up off the bed and I just began to walk around and sing that song, worshiping God. And you know what? They began to sing the song with me. And when we got to the line, "You're perfect in all of your ways," she just began to weep and to sing those lines. She just sang it louder and louder. "You're perfect in all of your ways." I believe when those kinds of things happen, when we worship God in the midst of pain, in the midst of not understanding, unable to explain why this happened, all the expectations of your first child now dashed, your dreams, your hopes, your aspirations for this child, not only yours, but also your parents, the grandparents, angry about everything. To be able to sing, "You're perfect in all of your ways." I believe that God just calls the angels over. "Hey, would you look at this? We never hear this. This woman is praising me at the depth that she has ever experienced in her life." And I can tell you that when that happened, death left that room. And hope came into that room. Something beautiful came into that room. Just a glimmer of hope. You know, sometimes that's all we need. Just a little bit of hope. You see, I can't fix it. Not clever words, I can't fix it. But she has a father, the same one I have, and he's very, very good, and he actually can fix it. And so when we come to people in pain, people with tragedies, some very severe, some even not so severe, they just may need us to listen and then to get them connected to their Father. You know, why was I the only one there in the room? What was it? You know, most people have a hard time dealing with messy tragedy. They're angry. The family was so angry, and I was able to explain to them, you have to think of it from their point of view. Your parents were all with high expectations about this grandchild. And they are really, really hurting, and they're taking it out on you. When we're hurting, we're looking for someone to blame. You're such an easy target. I just recommend you forgive them. Understand where they're coming from. They can't give you what they don't have. They're disappointed. They'll get over it. The reason I was able to minister to Rick and Rita is not because I'm a neurosurgeon. It's because I understand what it's like to have the best of intentions, to work very, very diligently to try to do something for someone, and to fail, and to have that person die, and to have people blame me for it. And wish I would have tried the other operation. I wish I would have done it the other way. Oh, I know it would have been all that shame. You see, we spend all this time beating ourselves up. Well, I mean, why do we spend time beating ourselves up? It's because you actually derive something from it. The reason you spend time saying, oh, I'm so stupid, I can't believe I did that, is because there's something about the brain that feels powerful when you know the right thing to do and you tell yourself, you did it wrong, there was a better option, you should have known better. And it feels sort of empowering, sort of powerful. Downside is you're also on the receiving end of that. And so the net result ultimately ends up with anxiety or depression. It's not helpful. But it feels powerful whether you're saying it to someone else or whether you're saying it to yourself. But the reason that I could minister to her was because I had gone through a similar pain. What have you gone through? What your pain, what your tragedy, what your loss, whatever it is that you think is the worst possible thing about your life, is actually your anointing. That is where you, having gotten through that without bitterness, praising God, are now able to go back and help other people get through that same sort of tragedy. It is your automatic anointing if you wish to receive it. Because you then have the moral authority to speak into someone's life. I know maybe not exactly how you feel, but I got an idea what shame feels like. When you did your best and when you're exhausted and when you haven't slept, I know what that feels like. I prayed for them. They left the hospital. And I got a call a few weeks later from Rick, and he said, we're home now. We're doing well. We're in a really good place. You were the only one that spoke life to us. You're the only one that encouraged us. Thank you. It is hard to encourage people who have messy lives. But people need it. Especially they need it to combat the shame that is in our culture. "18 months later, Rick and Rita had another baby boy. They had a home birth, and it was successful. And they got through a very traumatic situation, which could have been very scarring and indeed wounded them for life. But because if you can get through and release the shame and help people with their shame, potentially they can get through without the trauma. I want to read a passage of Scripture now. I'm going to read a very familiar passage to you. It's the parable of the prodigal son. And many of you have already heard this many times, and so you sort of switch off like, yeah, I know. Heard that. I want you to listen for some new meaning. I want you to listen to how God treats people who have made really big mistakes. What is his attitude? We're in Luke chapter 15. I'm reading out of the ESV. And set this up, the tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to Jesus. And the Pharisees and scribes grumbled, saying, "This man receives sinners and eats with them." So he told them this parable. And he tells them three parables: the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the prodigal son. And he's saying, in the words of Ken Bailey, he's saying, "Gentlemen, you think that I receive sinners and eat with them, but I'm here to tell you it's far worse than you think." And he said, "There was a man who had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of the property that's coming to me.' And he divided his property among them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all that he had and took a journey into a far country. And there he squandered his property in reckless living. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into the field to feed pigs. And he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, 'How many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread, and yet I perish here with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants.' And he arose and came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Bring quickly the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet. And bring the fattened calf and kill it. And let us eat and celebrate. For this, my son, was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' And they began to celebrate. Now his older son was in the field. And as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And he said to him, 'Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fattened calf, because he has received him back safe and sound.' But he was angry and refused to go in. His father came out and entreated him. But he answered his father, 'Look, these many years I have served you. I have never disobeyed your command, Yet you never gave me a young goat to celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him." And he said to him, "Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours." Some of my favorite words in all of Scripture. Son, you are always with me. Isn't that worth something? And all that I have, all that is mine, is yours. It was fitting to celebrate and be glad, for this brother was dead and is alive. He is lost and is found. Most of us know that story, and we go to the end of it, which is a powerful, powerful ending. But this week, as I was meditating, I was looking at the beginning of it. And something really, really caught my attention. This young son, this second son, asks his father for his inheritance, and the father doesn't argue with him. There's not a, "Can you reconsider? That this is really, you shouldn't make such a hasty decision." He divides the property, gives it to him, he cashes it out, and leaves. Really no discussion. And I thought to myself, why doesn't the father argue with him? And I realized that the Father actually does that to all of us. He gives us resources, and he says, "They're yours. Ladies, your beauty. I wonder if you've ever used that to gain pleasure for yourself. Men, what about your intelligence, your wealth, your business, your money, your finances? Have we ever used his resources for things that didn't honor or glorify the Father just to get pleasure for ourselves? Well, I certainly have. I loved the glory that I received in neurosurgery. I loved doing great cases and showing them at national meetings and have all that glory come to me. I wonder if we can have a little sympathy or maybe even identify with this prodigal son of using resources God has given you, somehow believing that you can make it better on the outside, because I believed I could. And most of us, and I believe this is why the Father basically doesn't argue with us. He says it's very important for you. You're going to have to prove it to yourself that you're not going to get a better deal than you have here. But I can tell you don't believe that, so I'm willing to give you all these gifts, and you don't have to use them here in the house. You can use them wherever you'd like. But you're never going to get a better deal here. And if you just knew me, you'd want to stay here. But all right, hotshot, he says to me, go ahead, burn it out. Do what you can do. Try to get your pleasure, your glory, the world's way. What also amazed me when I thought about this is, doesn't the Father care about how offensive this son is being? In that culture, as in ours, it might have been a little bit worse, but it would be the same as you asking your father for your inheritance before he's dead. It's basically saying, I wish you were dead. It's offensive. The Father doesn't actually seem to register any of these offenses. He's not, when the son comes back, he's not saying, I need to tell you how hurt I've been. And when the son comes back, he's not actually saying, did you spend all the money? Is it all gone? A third of the property is gone. No coins in your pockets, it's gone? This father is thinking about something else. He's showing us what his heart is like, and that's what Jesus is trying to show the Pharisees that he's speaking to. You see, there's the offense of this devaluation that your son only values you for your money. That hurts. And then what are the neighbors going to say? What are they going to think when your son leaves? Oh, they're going to talk. Oh, we know what's going on in that house. He's not quite the father that he pretends to be. Yeah, I knew. There's a reason that kid left. He's got to deal with that offense. And then the offense when the son comes back of this man running down the street. And that culture, men of any means did not run. It was a sign of disgrace. And then he's got the offense of the older brother he's dealing with. And then he throws this big party for the prodigal son. And then he's got the offense of, it's not just the older brother who thinks what he's doing is pretty crazy. I imagine a lot of his dinner guests, they were eating his food, they were drinking his wine, but they're saying, whispering among themselves, who's going to make sure the kid doesn't do it again? I mean, what is he thinking? Who's going to teach him a lesson? And when the father comes out to talk with the older brother, the prodigal son is left alone at the party. Who's speaking with him? If you were at the party, would you be speaking with the prodigal son? Or would you sort of avoid him and just... You see, people who have made messes of their lives, they're easy to avoid. We don't like to get involved. I would imagine the father was talking to him, and when he left, I'm not sure who was talking to the son. But at all these inconveniences, the father has not one word of judgment or condemnation. I just want to pause right now, and I want to do an exercise. There are things that we can do to bring ourselves closer to God, and one of those things is gratitude. We have all been given what this younger son and the older son are given. All that is mine is yours. All of the gifts that we've been given, many of us have actually squandered them, and we have never apologized for it, confessed about it, even recognized it, or even given thanks that we have these gifts, that God has given us such incredible gifts. And I want to take a moment right now for you to just visit with the Lord this morning and just thank Him for the gifts that He gave you to steward, whether or not you use them for His glory. The brain responds very positively to gratitude. If you're having trouble with any kind of relationship, including your relationship with God, a good place to start is gratitude. Gratitude has a neurochemical reaction that allows you then to become more relational. It also works with people. So what we want to do now is just spend a little bit of time in gratitude for the gifts you've been given. And if you've squandered some of those, feel free to acknowledge that. And if you really want to recognize the heart of the Father, you might even recognize some of the offense that you've caused Him that He has never complained about. He's showing us His heart here. And I just want to take a moment. Let's give you about a minute right now. Wonderful. I want you to continue this gratitude as you leave here. There's one more thing I want to bring up from this passage that I found new for the first time. In each of these parables, I started thinking it's like the parable of these three crazy people, because they're asking others to celebrate with them things that I probably wouldn't celebrate with them. Someone comes back and he's found his sheep and says, invite your friends and neighbors to come celebrate your sheep. And we all kind of nod like, oh, that sounds totally normal. We'd all celebrate his sheep. A woman in a house finds her coin. Oh, friends and neighbors, come, I found my coin. Oh, must have been a different culture. They celebrated stuff like that. I don't think so. Everyone's busy. They're busy then, busy now. You found. What's my question? Where did you lose your coin? Why did you lose it? Where did you put it? I just want to know what happened so it doesn't happen to me. I don't want to come celebrate your coin. And the last one, my son came home, spent a third of my property. Come celebrate with me. These are crazy people. And God is showing you something about his heart. And for the first time, I started understanding when Jesus says, unless you become like a child, what do children do? They celebrate everything. In fact, when we talk to them, we go, oh, that's great. We have these great big expressions because they are celebratory, and so is your Father. And he wants you to be as well. Come celebrate with me. Can you celebrate? How good are you at celebration? Probably like me, many of you only celebrate when the big things are done, when the check is finally in, and then we only celebrate very, very shortly because the next project has just started. It's already underway. We don't celebrate so much. But if you want to be like the Father, and he's actually asking you, Jesus is giving us a picture, a portrait of the Father. He has this childlike exuberance. He celebrates things, especially people that come back to him. And I wonder if you can celebrate people the same way. Do I get disappointed when people don't run their life the way I think they should? Yeah. And the reason is because when people around you make poor decisions, it doesn't just cost them, it actually costs you, doesn't it? The father, that was 1/3 of his property. He's still alive, and 1/3 of his property is gone. That's a fact. When people around me make decisions, can I still love them? Must I shame them, or can I release them to God? However it is that you want to do that, I want to maintain a childlike attitude, the same attitude my father has toward people who squander his resources. Oh, there are consequences. He didn't tell the son, we'll work out and figure out how you're going to get it back. Look, there are consequences to squandering 1/3 of your property. But he loved the boy, and his boy was back, because now, what's going to make sure he doesn't leave again? Well, if the father is convinced, if he just gets to know me, he would never want to leave again. He's so childlike, he's so beautiful. And I want us to be like that as well. Father, thank you for everyone who's come today. I ask a blessing on them, a blessing on their relationships, a blessing on how they treat you and the others in their life. Bless their health. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you.